So, I'm gonna make a quick video, hopefully a quick video, on honing a straight razor. In this case, this is just a basic American-made straight razor. So it's a hollow ground. It does have a bit of a rounded point. It's almost a mix between a spike point that's been rounded a slightly bit, probably just from use. So I'm going to go from setting the bevel all the way through finishing to hopefully get a shave ready straight razor. So today I have the razor, a wine glass, a Naniwa Professional series stone. This is their newer version of the older Chosera stones. I like the older Choseras better, but this works about the same. A small piece of coticle with a slate backing. This is not BBW, this is a dark, just slate material that's used as support for this coticle portion of it. And then a 7-inch combination coticle. So you can see this has black slate backing. This has a nice purple bluish color. This is actually a whetstone. You can use this to sharpen your knives, sharpen your razors. It's slow cutting, not very fine. I'd say it's a middle grade, probably somewhere between this 1000 grit stone by the Japanese system and then the actual coticle portion, which is the polishing portion. Some people use this. I don't personally like to use it too much. I haven't actually tried this exact stone, so at some point I will test out this BBW side, Belgian blue whetstone. The way these stones are mined is that this coticle layer is formed, the yellow layer here, is formed between layers of this Belgian blue. So it's really hard to get very thick layers of the coticle portion of it versus the Belgian blue. So when they mine it, where that transition layer is, these are called natural combos. And generally you can tell it's a natural combo because it's not very straight lines. It's one solid piece, it's not glued together. This clearly has very straight transition lines and is glued together. This is slate, this is not Belgian blue. And here's another example of a little bit smaller coticle. This is a 6-inch coticle. But as you can see, the transition lines, where the two layers meet and how they're intertwined. Versus if this was a straight line, perfectly straight line, two square pieces, what they do is they'll mine out the coticle layer, cut it, mine out a piece of BBW, smooth out, lap the ends, glue them together. Natural coticle layers or natural combos are a bit harder to find than the glued stones, just because of the way that they mine them and how hard it is to find that actual transition layer versus just mining out big pieces of coticle and cutting it down. So why do I have a little stone here and a bigger stone and nothing else? So this, I'm going to rub against the bigger stone to create what's called a slurry. A slurry just means a solid particles suspended within a liquid. So by rubbing the stones together, I'm going to lift up some of the abrasive particles out of the stone into a liquid, and that's going to just basically create my transition from the 1000 grit all the way up to the polish, and I'll slowly dilute that slurry until I'm finishing on just water. It's called the dilucot method because you're diluting a coticle, right? So it's pretty straightforward. Some people like it, some people don't. Some people would prefer to instead just go from a normal progression, which would be adding in a stone like this, which is a Naniwa Superstone. This is a softer stone than the Chosera line, so it's a line down, a little bit cheaper. Great for polishing. Not so great at convenience because it takes much longer to use as opposed to the Chosera line. I personally like these. This is an older one that's thicker. It's still attached to the base. The newer ones are called specialty stones. Just like the Choseras, they change their line, change their formulation, use a different binder. Because what these are just abrasive particulates of a certain size that are bound together using some kind of ceramic resin binder, whatever the case may be, depending on the individual stone, to hold it together into a solid piece that they mold, right? So they just cast mold it, and then they attach it to the base. I won't go into too much detail in that process. Full disclosure, I'm a bit of a nerd, and I'm a chemical engineer by trade, so I get into this stuff pretty heavily. But I'll try not to go too much into material science here and bore the hell out of people. So, normal progression, if I just wanted to see how this Coticule finishes a razor, I would go from here, transition to the 5K stone for a little bit more polishing, and then finish with just water on the Coticule. But I want to see how this Coticule works as a mid-grade all the way through a finisher and just kind of get a better impression of it. The last piece. Why do I have a wine glass? Well, the reason I have a wine glass is because I want any piece of glass that I can take this edge that has been sharpened at some point, because this is a vintage razor. It's been honed all the way through to shave ready. I'm sure it's shaved a bunch of people's faces. I want to dead this edge so I can start with a fresh edge. As you can see, I put tape on the spine of the razor. 2 reasons. One, because I want to protect the spine from any hone wear. Just like you're removing metal here on the edge, you're also removing metal from the spine as the spine rubs against that stone, and you change the geometry of the razor a bit. So I don't want to change that geometry too much from the original grind. So I actually added a bit more angle by adding that tape. What that does is that lifts that spine by the thickness of the tape up and changes the angle of which I'm sharpening this razor. So it's going to change my bevel angle. And as you go up, you increase angle and therefore make the bevel smaller. If I was to lay this flat against the spine, it would be smaller angle and therefore a little bit more wider of a bevel. But these are extra hollow grounds are already set up to have an extremely thin bevel. So why am I using glass? So I'm going to go into a little bit of science here. Glass is actually an amorphous solid, meaning that there's no crystal lattice structure and there's no structure for how the glass molecules line up. Instead, what you have is a very strong material that can actually have tensile strength equivalent or stronger than stainless steel that's abrasive and that will actually kill the thinner edge, because glass is as strong as its surface condition. So if you scratch glass, ruin the surface condition, it becomes weaker and more brittle and more likely to break. In any case, I'm just going to take this razor and I'm going to rub it just down the bottom of this glass a little bit. And I'm not pressing into it. All I want to do is rub it against there like I'm honing it, just to kill that edge and start fresh. The thing about razors is you want them sharp enough to drag across your skin and shave hair. So this is not going to shave hair at this point. As you polish it more and more, and I'm not going to go into too much detail there because it's more of a beginner video. You can actually drag the blade across and cut the hairs at an angle, as opposed to going sideways and using a cutting stroke like you would if you were cutting vegetables with a knife. Let's get right into it. So the way to hone a razor, in a hollow ground where the bevel angle is already set up for you, you simply lay the bevel or the spine flat against the stone and then use the same cutting stroke that you would with a knife. So edge forward, cutting strokes, and you drag the blade in an X motion in order to get the entire length of the edge. So I'm gonna stay a little bit out of there and talk about it a little more as I go. So this is a splash and go stone, meaning I do not soak this stone. If you soak it, it can ruin the binder and it will crack. These have a tendency to crack. So I've already lapped this flat, and I'm just going to use X strokes. No pressure. I'm not going to lay this blade and grind into the stone. I don't want to do that. You can do that if it's a very stubborn edge, specifically with these Choseras, which are harder and can withstand a little bit of pressure, as opposed to these softer super stones, which you will cut into the stone. So I'm just flipping the edge over, using light X strokes, just water. Even strokes, as even as I can. You know, I like to use one hand. Sometimes I use two if I'm trying to use a little bit more pressure. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the displacement of the water on the stone, in that I want this edge to undercut that water, where I can see water going over the edge. And that kind of gives me an idea of when this stone is done, the edge is ready to test out. For bevel set on a razor, I just wanted to start shaving arm hair at the base of the hair. And that's when I start moving on. So I'm hoping this goes pretty fast because this is a pretty aggressive cutting stone. What you sometimes will see is swarf on the stone. What that just means is as I'm removing metal from the edge, that metal has somewhere to go, and it usually just winds up darkening the water, so you'll start to see the water get a little gray. The lighting's not great right now, so it's kind of hard to see that happening. Now you can use just constant X strokes with no pressure. If it's getting stubborn, you can start to use a little more pressure. Some guys like circles. I personally only use circles when I'm setting a bevel because you're removing material much faster from the edge and you're not doing it as evenly as you would in the case of just using light X strokes. But, you know, whatever your preference is. Some guys like to use back and forth strokes. Try to make the work a little easier. Most guys will tilt the heel of the razor forward because you don't want to hone into that shoulder of the razor. You really just want to get the edge of the blade from the heel all the way through to the tip, and you want an even cutting surface. Again, I'm not going to go into burrs, and I'm not going to go into, you know, microscopes and looking at the edge and scratch patterns and all that fun stuff. I'm doing this all by feel right now and what kind of feedback I'm getting from the stone that it's giving me. So using my other hand here is just strictly for guiding. I'm not putting any pressure on it. I'm just using the weight of the edge because, again, I want to make sure that I'm evenly removing metal. The newer the stone, I feel the more thirsty it is, meaning it'll soak up some of that water a bit more. So I kind of splash it and check the water as I go. If you're testing it on your arm hair and shaving your arm hair as you go, which I'm going to do, you're going to find that some hair sticks to the razor if you don't clean it off, and then it'll get on the stone, and then what you're going to feel is a lot more resistance on the stone, almost like if you're rolling a grocery cart over a piece of wood and it stops your wheel. So I try not to do that too much till I think it's ready, because I don't want that to happen. It's going to interrupt my honing of the razor. I would say if you're a beginner, which is really the intent of this video, start with two hands. Just kind of hold the blade flat against the stone. Really keep the weight on the spine and not on the edge. And just let the razor glide against the stone. And that'll help you with getting the motion down, the muscle memory. You know, start slow, even strokes. As you progress, you can get a little faster. You don't want to cut yourself. Obviously, that's the most important thing. So I'm getting a bit of swarf on the stone, and I can see the edge beginning to polish. But I'm not going to rush this part because this is the most important part of honing a razor, is setting that first layer, that bevel. So it's kind of counterintuitive in that when it comes to a razor's sharpness, the most important stone you're going to use is going to be your finishing stone. But the most important step in the process is setting that bevel. Again, a little counterintuitive, but if you don't start with a good base and a nice even scratch pattern, you're not going to be able to evenly remove those scratches as you polish the stone. Because all you're doing here is you're rubbing one surface against another to remove material. So you're removing steel from the razor by rubbing it against an abrasive stone. Pretty straightforward. The thinner the bevel, the sharper you can make it. But you got to remember, razors are designed only to cut hair. So even though I can put a super polished, super sharp edge on these razors, if I was to cut anything remotely abrasive beyond a hair, it would immediately kill that edge and I would have to start over. So always make sure that the only thing that touches the edge of your razor is hair. Unlike knives, knives are meant to cut lots of things. They're tools. Generally abrasive things like rope, cardboard, packages, all that's going to kind of kill that edge a little bit. So from a standpoint of usability, I would never go above, 3,000, 4,000 grit on a knife that I am going to use in any kind of significant fashion for anything outside of cutting vegetables and or sushi knives, which cutting meat in very fine, thin, precise layers. I actually think this is about done here on this 1K stone from what I can see and what I can feel. And I can see that it's undercutting the water. So I'm just going to give it a few more strokes. Again, I'm not counting. Some guys like to count and they have a very routine pattern that they like to use. I do this by feel in that test and check, right? So when I feel that I'm ready and that this edge is ready to move on, I check it, see if it's at the point where I can move on to a different stone. I just kind of want to, I like to give it a few of these back and forth strokes just to kind of make sure that I get the whole length of the edge. Just a personal preference. So as you can hear, unlike the first time, I dragged this on my arm after killing the edge on the glass. It's actually shaving arm hair now, and pretty good. It's popping hair pretty good at the base of it. Now if I try to drag this across my arm like this, it's not going to cut hair. It's not that sharp yet. But what I want is I want to make sure that from the heel all the way down the edge of the blade, it's popping hairs. And it is. So ready to move on to coticle. So I'm going to create a slurry. These stones are non-porous. They're natural stones, so they can be harder, softer. Every stone's different. Whichever the two of these stones is harder, it's going to pull up material from the other stone. So when I rub these together, if the bottom stone is softer, then that's will be giving off particulates to create that slurry. If the slurry stone is softer, that's what's going to give me the materials that are comprising my liquid solid mixture there known as a slurry. So I like it to start milky white, a little thicker. And then I dilute it as I go. So I'm going to give this a little splash of water just to thin it up a little bit. And then, just like with the other stone, I start honing. So what you'll find is that a little bit slurry falls off the edge of the stone as you hone. It gets stuck to the top of the razor as you undercut it. So you might need to build a little more slurry as you go. You might need to keep adding water. I'm doing this all by feel. There's no numbers here. It's all pretty much just trial and error. At this stage, I don't mind doing some circles. I don't like to do too many because you're going to see that slurry darken up as some metal particulates get mixed in with that slurry. I'm not using pressure. I'm still just laying the weight of the blade. Since this stone is a little thinner, it's about half the size of the other stone I was using, I do like to use my finger on my left hand a little bit more to help guide the blade. Or I'll do what's called hand honing, where I will hold this in my hand, which I like to do with the thinner stones. In this case, it's pretty good sized coticle, so I can use it as a bench stone here. For the sake of this video, I'm using it as a bench stone. And really, I'm just pushing that slurry against the edge of my blade down the length of the stone, and just kind of pushing it as I go. And as I start to see some darkness build up in that slurry, I'm gonna start diluting it, adding water, make it a little thinner, kind of reduce the ratio of solid particulates to water. So I want more water, less particulate as I go, until I eventually just finish up with just water. This actually stone is really nice so far. Give me a lot of good feedback, and that I can hear audibly feedback of the stone grinding against the razor, and I can feel resistance as I pull the razor down the edge of the stone. So for those of you guys who are more experienced, there are a lot better videos than this one out there on how to use a coticle. This is more a beginner kind of introduction. I don't like the term Hohenmeister. I think it's stupid. I understand guys like it because there's people out there who hone razors for money, and who've been doing this for a very long time, are very experienced and know what they're doing. So if you want to use that term, good for you. I've never heard of an apprenticeship for sharpening razors, honing razors. There's no classes out there for how to use stones. Every natural stone is different, so I say just practice. Try it out. I'm a hobbyist. I learn as I go. I learn new stuff all the time. I'm not going to argue about definitions of wet stone versus water stone versus oil stone versus honing steel, sharpening, polishing. There's a lot of books and information and forums and guys who give opinions. I don't care how experienced you are. At the end of the day, unless you have some kind of scientific backing to back up what you're saying, it's all subjective. So guys on the internet like to argue. It's just the way of life. Everybody wants to be the smartest guy in the room. Everybody wants to know, more than the next guy, and we all like to learn, and we all like to quote, books that are 100 years old from barbers and, knife makers. And at the end of the day, if you got a stone, try it out, learn how to use it. Does it remove metal from the blade? Does it do its job? Does it polish the stone? Or does it polish the razor? Can you get the razor sharp enough to shave hair with? That's all that matters. Sometimes guys like to put really high polish on the edge of a blade. In my opinion, that doesn't really do much anything for aesthetics. I know guys like to look under the microscope and like to look at the burrs and the scratch patterns. That's fine. I understand all that. That's a little more scientific, and I get that than just feel. But for me, if the razor is comfortable to shave with, then it's shave ready, it's got a good edge, and the stone's a good stone. My opinion on what's shave ready might be different than the next guy's. I do own a Goku Mayo 20,000 grit finishing stone. That's pretty much the best finish on a razor I've ever personally used. Guys claim J-Nats are better. Guys claim Thuringians are better and Eschers are better. It's all subjective. At the end of the day, can the razor shave your face comfortably and cleanly? That's what matters. I don't hone razors for money. I don't like to, because again, everybody's comfort level is different. If somebody is new to straight razors and would like to learn and wants to start off with an edge that will shave for them, and they can go from there, I will be more than happy to hone their razor for them, and I usually do it for free, unless I'm selling them a razor, in which case I only charge them for the razor, not for honing it. I enjoy this. This is a hobby I do. I want more people to enjoy that hobby. I understand guys who are experienced, will, charge people for honing their razors. That's fine. To each their own. I don't do it because, I don't claim to be better at honing razors than anybody else. I just know that I can give myself a comfortable shave at the end of the day and compare one stone to the next that I have personally in my collection. If I've never used the stone, I can't obviously compare anything to it because I have nothing to check. So, to each their own. So I've got this pretty much almost down to water at this point. And again, I'm not using any pressure. I'm just trying to get even strokes down the edge of the blade. This one doesn't have any curvature to the blade, so it doesn't have a smile. There's nothing I need to do for rolling X strokes or any of that fun stuff. I'm just dragging steel across the stone. And I apologize for that background noise. My vent is extremely loud. This one's just about done. I won't know for sure until I actually try it out. I'm still going to strop it, but it does have a good polish on the edge. You know, and I'm getting good feedback. Again, I'm doing this all by feel, just through my experience. And I've never used this stone, so I actually don't know how fine it is. So what I'll probably do is, after I'm done with this portion of it, using the really abbreviated version of the dilettante method here. I would normally take a lot more time with this, but for the sake of this video, I'm going fast. I'm going to strop it, I'm going to try it out, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a synthetic stone progression and then just use plain water on this to finish the stone like I would any other finishing stone in the progression, and just kind of get a better idea of how fine it is and how good of a polish it can put on a razor. And it's kind of giving me a glassy feel right now, in that it's really smooth. I'm not getting a ton of feedback, which is good for me because that's what I'm looking for, and it's undercutting the water that I do have on the stone. So a few more strokes, and then I'm just going to test this guy out on my arm, see if I can pop hairs. Then what I will do is I will strop it, give it a hanging hair test to make sure that it can cut hairs as I drag them across the blade, and then I'm going to shave with it. All right, that's it. Time to test it.